everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Conversations with the Pros. I'm chatting with ballerina Nardia Boodoo. Hello.
Hello.
Where are you? You're based. You're in Washington, D.C., right?
Yes, I'm in Washington, D.C. I dance with the Washington Ballet. I've been in the company for the past 5 years. Yes, 5 years. Previously, I was with the Pennsylvania Ballet, and then I started at the Washington Ballet, but in the studio company.
Got it. And you did most of your training with Dance Theater of Harlem, correct?
I attended a few summer intensives, but I went to the Baltimore School for the Arts for high school.
Oh, very nice. So, Nardia, I'd love to hear about how you would describe your relationship with ballet and with dance in general, from the days of your pre-professional training and how it's shifted to where you're at now in your professional career.
As a pre-professional, um, it's a lot of work, right? You have to have a regimented schedule. You come in, kind of not yet a company member, not really quite a student. You're in this in-between ambiguous phase, but yet you're definitely committed. So when I was a trainee, I've been a trainee at both Joffrey and the Washington Ballet, and we would start at the same time as the company and sometimes take company class, but we would segue into our own classes in our own performances and rehearsal schedules. And sometimes you would be asked to join, and if you were lucky, to be a part of the core parts of like the big ballets that the company would do, or like the Nutcracker, or if you do like a Gisela or Swan Lake, you would be asked to fill in. And so it was like balancing the ambiguous school and not yet company period of time. And then I eventually matriculated into the studio company, me and one other girl from my trainee program. And pretty much we were doing corps de ballet of the company stuff. And then we would have showings and little tourings of our own repertoire, which was really cool. Mostly like community engagement style. Eventually you have to end, you have to like audition and go into the next level or the next phase, maybe not the company. For me, I was always very one track minded. I was determined to be in a ballet company. And my first offer was from the Pennsylvania Ballet under Angel Correa. I was there for a year, and then the Washington Ballet got a new director, and I decided to give that a try. I love DC. And so I then got a company contract, and I have been here since.
Ah, awesome. And
Yeah.
through that time, was there ever a specific time where you can pinpoint that you started to maybe think about the role of food in your performance?
Yeah. Well, growing up, no one in my family really monitored the things that I ate. It was more so just healthy food. And so I was really fortunate for that. I wasn't really focused or hyper focused on my food intake. I was more so an intuitive eater.
Ah,
If I felt hungry, I would eat. If I wasn't hungry, I wouldn't eat. It wasn't a situation where I felt like I needed to monitor, edit myself. I guess I would say I have a balanced diet, and I knew that early on, if I were to sort of emulate things that I was seeing, that it would develop into something that I would regret later.
yeah. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of dancers experience this idea, whether it's coming
Yeah.
internally or externally, this idea of just policing their food choices. So to have a more intuitive approach and not feel like the policing has to be there in order to be successful in the studio, I think is a huge plus.
Yeah. And honestly, I wasn't really aware that that was a practice, right? Um, I learned about it from peers. You would see like, oh, we're all having lunch, and one particular person may not be having lunch. And then the questions would arise, and then you kind of learn what's happening. And sometimes as a dancer, you go, well, does that mean I have to do that too? Like, is this the way that we all should be? But luckily, I had a strong foundation in healthy eating that I didn't really internalize that behavior.
We see this with summer intensives, just being in that extreme competitive environment. So often, I think my busiest time just as a dietitian is the end of August, when all of these teachers come home from their summer intensive and they have just like picked up a ton of usually just unsustainable behaviors around food.
Absolutely. You know, much of dance culture is based off of habits. And, if you see a dancer that is seemingly successful and your teachers gravitate towards, you want to do what she's doing. And it's reinforced, whatever she's doing. And so that's a real situation. It really is. We need to normalize uh, not like a health and taking care of ourselves and understanding that food is how we get our power. Food is what gives us the nutrients and the energy to get through ballets. I mean, I'm not really a nice person if I'm not fed. So that alone is like an indication.
Absolutely. It's so true that the culture in general definitely fear mongers a lot around calories, the word calories, when in fact calories is literally just another word for energy. And coming from our food, you're right, food is our fuel. So I agree with you. I think that there needs to be a major push of just promoting this idea that food shouldn't necessarily be something that dancers have to police or monitor or fear, but rather
Yeah,
can very much aid in their performance.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's an emphasis on strength these days, and the aesthetics have a lot to do with our outlooks. Um, I have encountered situations sometimes where I was out with friends, or I would be like sitting on the floor and eating lunch, and I'd be the only one eating. And there were some times where I'm like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't eat at the ballet or the summer intensive that I was at, because it's like making me feel uncomfortable. So I don't know. I feel like maybe like it's trend, like it's just like following each other.
Yeah.
However, some of my favorite ballerinas are so strong and so healthy and have very nice muscular strength, and it's and like eat, and that's what I like. I like that. I like a person who, or a dancer who, sort of embodies a ballerina in the sense that she's not just like living and breathing just for the stage. She's also living and breathing for her health and the longevity of her career.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing also that, in my opinion, falls to the waistline here is um, when we do see dancers policing their food, it really takes away from their mental clarity and from their mental performance. And I am sure you can attest for the amount of mental focus you need for your artistry on stage. It's like it's not even just about strength and endurance, it's also about you as an artist.
Absolutely. I think people forget that you have to feed your brain as well as your muscles.
Yeah.
And your brain is a very important muscle.
Nardia, lots of dancers, as we're saying, really do experience a ton of challenges along their journey, especially when it comes to body and food. Any like specific challenge you did experience, maybe whether it's like as a dancer of color, that you experienced just through your training?
Absolutely. I think there's like a stigma against dancers of color, specifically about our body shapes, sizes, our ability to kind of sort of bulk up, and this strong emphasis on this ultra lean, thin aesthetic. And I sort of challenge that because naturally I look the way I look, but I think it's just a myth. It's just a stereotype, and I don't feel like there's anything, it doesn't take away to have more muscle. It doesn't take away to be a different shape at all. If anything, it makes you more unique. And also, it's more natural, you know? Specifically with like the dancers of color in the industry, it's getting a lot better. Of course, there needs to be a lot more work done, and there needs to be more people at the front of the room of color, of course, and an embracement of all and variety. So these go hand in hand.
I was speaking with Sydney Washington, the Black Swan Diaries, on one of
Yeah.
these, and she brought up such a good point that honestly, me being someone who's white doesn't think about having more dancers of color, yes, in the front of the room, but also on the other side, like the directors and the teachers and, you know, the ones making the decisions for these companies.
Absolutely. It does start with their administrative directors, specifically ballet masters, right? There are lots of ex-ballerinas with a wealth of experience that can contribute. Yes, dancers of color are being welcome. There's maybe one or two directors in this country that are Black specifically, one Asian director, and that's kind of not, one Latino director, and that's it, you know? I think the times are changing, and there are major ballet companies that are up for new directorship, and I'm hoping that they are inclusive and they choose people that reflect our world or our country today.
Absolutely. And we also, by the way, see this, and again, I'm sure you can attest with this, with just like body image, weight stigma as well, and just, you know, getting more diversity in that realm.
Absolutely. When I think about some of my favorite movers, I don't ever consider the size of their legs or their arms or anything like that. I think about what they're giving, how they're dancing, their relationship to the space and the music, their emotions, you know, something that'll move me. My emphasis on artistry has nothing to do with the thinness of your body. In fact, it takes away. I don't want to worry. Like, you know, is this girl okay?
I love your point in the fact that how a dancer transcends an audience,
Yes,
is always going to outpower, you know, what their body shape or weight is.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm so happy conversations like this are happening, and that we're moving towards a more healthy culture within our ballet world, because it's important, and it's just no longer it, you know? No, it's a different time, it's a different space. Everyone wants different things, and health is important. So.
And on that note, actually, you know, in regards to cultivating a healthier culture, a lot of do hyper focus, you know what I mean, when it comes to like being a dancer. And I think we experienced this most in those pre-professional years that you were talking about, where you're kind of like, you're not necessarily yet in a school, you're not necessarily yet in a company, and you're just trying to impress whoever you can, right, to see you. And what would you recommend, or what do you do in order to find a bit more balance in your life so that it's not only about the stage?
Oh, you know, Alvin Ailey has this famous quote about how his favorite dancers live a full and actualized life outside of the studio. So when I was a trainee or a pre-professional, I wasn't yet in college. I am in now, and that helps as a professional, but as a pre-professional, I got out in the city that I lived in. I mean, I was in Chicago, you know, I went to the museums, I hung out at the parks, I went to see other ballet companies that came through. I, you know, immersed myself in the art and culture of it all. I took care of my body. I cultivated relationships with people and have long lasting relationships, friendships. You know, it's like yin and yang. You have to have both. Otherwise, if one's out of balance, it's not going to work out. And I'm so happy that I did that, because now in my career, I understand that after a hard week, it's okay to go hang out with a friend, sit around and like maybe listen to music. It's so much, it's very needed. It's therapeutic. You know, you have to have like a very strong focus as a dancer. You have to walk in every single day, do everything that you need to do, progress from one step to the other. And that gets a little daunting. And it's only healthy to sometimes say, okay, not talking about ballet today. I mean, sometimes my friends, like, I have to be like, guys, okay, let's talk about something else. Recently, like, a couple of my friends and I have taken up beading.
Oh, I love
Like,
that.
yeah, we just like sit around and like make little necklaces with beads, and it's just so therapeutic and nice and lovely. And you're still with other people and doing something constructive. It just like takes your mind away and forces your other parts of your brains to work. It's really nice. And specifically me, I also do modeling, which is like nice to be a part of a different world and make connections with people from all over the world and do like lots of little projects. And then I'm in school, and that's amazing too, like using that other part of the scholarly part of my brain, um, because dance is a short career, honestly. It doesn't last forever, and you have a short period of time to achieve what you need to achieve. And then what happens next? So if you define yourself only by what you do in the studio and only amount your self-worth to that, it's not going to last long. You're going to burn
Ah, yes, I love that you use the word burnout because I think that's
out.
so true. Another word that I love and just reminds me of everything you're saying is just bringing depth to our lives and just not being so surface or just so one track minded.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, my favorite dancers are the ones that just let themselves go and let themselves be vulnerable. And how can you if you've never done that before? And I'm not saying to go and do something crazy, no. But I'm
Mm.
just saying, like, you need to have experiences in life. That's life. And ballet is such a wonderful profession. And, I feel so lucky to be a ballerina. Honestly, I do. And I worked very hard for it. But at the same time, it can be like a vacuum where you're just doing the same things all the time. And it's not natural either.
Absolutely, yeah. Talking about the pandemic a little bit, the pandemic
Okay.
definitely presented challenges for the dance industry. We're not quite out of it yet, but definitely in a different place than we were. Did anything for you come out of the pandemic, whether positive or negative?
At first, I like kind of thought that the pandemic was a punishment, because think about it like this, like you take a dancer away from the stage or the studio, and what are you? Who are you? What can you do? And I was a little upset. But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this as an opportunity to better myself. So I bought a piece of Marley. I bought a little pink ballet bar from Amazon. And I was like, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on that. I took more school classes. I kind of started studying Pilates more, a constructive way to move my body and strengthen myself, and also maybe in the future, become another avenue to transition. I really used the time to explore other aspects of myself that weren't necessarily in line with ballet, but it also reignited the fire of how much I love ballet. It really did. It made me realize how much of my identity is wrapped around that and how much I need it in my life.
Yeah, it's almost like that saying, I say this a lot, but you need to take two steps back in order to take like three steps forward,
Yeah.
right? And the pandemic really challenged a lot of dancers in that sense. So it's nice to hear you, come to terms with this idea that it really helped to just solidify how much you love this art form. This is like a fun little question, but any pre-performance rituals that you had, or even post-performance rituals?
Well, pre-performance, I definitely like to zone out. I share my dressing room with a few other of my colleagues, and I'll stick my earbuds in and just turn up the music, and I get into the role. I put my hair up, I put my headpiece on, I do my makeup, like I just zone out. Then I like to do a little mini bar, side stage. We don't have access usually to a studio at the theater, and also they're getting ready with the scenery. And then right before we go on, after I put my costumes on, I like triple and quadruple check my ribbons, make sure they're tacked properly. I make sure I have rosin on my tights on the inside. I like take a second to like remember everything and reassure myself that I know what I'm doing and it's going to be fine. And then just take a moment to be grateful, gratitude, absorb, take up space. And then I go on.
Ah, love that. So my last question, I ask this to everybody. I would love to hear how you would define what it means to be the healthy dancer.
The healthy dancer definitely is someone who takes her craft seriously. She comes to the studio prepared, knows everything what she needs to do. She has a game plan. She takes care of her mind equally as much as her body. And she enjoys her career while she can. That's a healthy dancer to me.
I love that. And it also really brings in everything you spoke about. But one thing I just want to zone in on for everybody watching are the practices and the mindset that you have to prevent something like burnout from happening, because I do think dancers can just be so vulnerable to perfectionism and burnout. And when you bring in these self-care practices and these mindset shifts like you're talking about, Nardia, it's just very inspiring and very helpful.
Oh man, I am just so glad that we're having a conversation like this. It's wonderful.
Yes, of course. Well, Nardia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be a part of this, honestly. Well, thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.